I think we'll kick off if everyone's cool with that. Great, so my name is John, so I'm from a company called Red Lemonade, and I'm hosting the stage here today. So my role in Red Lemonade is for business strategy to into a design, actionable problem-solving process. And the people we have here today do similar. I'll just quickly introduce them. They're not sitting under their pictures, but I'm sure you can work it out. So like I said, we have Paddy Monaghan, he's from Phorest, and he's a product director. We have Anita, she's from Teckro, and she's VP of product. And we have Noel, who's the head of design at Callan. So what I'd like you all to do, first of all, just introduce yourselves, tell us about the role, tell us a little bit about the company as well.
My name is Noel Joyce. I'm head of design at Hacks, and what we do is we invest in and we accelerate hardware startups, and we look at anything from medtech to robotics to products in consumer products, and we've dealt with, I would say, between 250 and 300 startups in the last 7 years. I've had a couple of startups myself, and understand the process that people go through when they're trying to develop a new product from sketch right the way through to manufacture. So I like to refer to the work that I do is we de-risk startups. That's essentially what we're trying to do, and it's specifically in the hardware space, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So if anyone wants to find out more about that kind of stuff, you can catch up with me after.
My name is Paddy Monaghan. I'm product director with Phorest. So Phorest does kind of all-in-one software for hair and beauty salons. So we do appointment book, marketing, sales, CRM, all that kind of stuff. And so within my role, we oversee design, product management, and data. And the company itself, we're at about 200 staff now. We're based out of Ireland, number one in Ireland and the UK. We've also got offices in Germany, Finland, just launched Phorest Australia, and we've offices in Philadelphia as well. So we're kind of trying to pick this specific niche and grow out from Ireland and kind of take over the world in this niche, not moving into gyms and stuff. We're just kind of owning this. That's Phorest.
Hi, I'm Anita, the VP of Product at Teckro. I suppose my role really involves managing the life cycle of products that we have right now and innovation of kind of upcoming products. Just to give you a little bit of background on Teckro, it's basically in the clinical trial space, so we digitise clinical research for the stakeholders within a clinical trial. So it just makes the product itself just allows for kind of access to confidential documents at any point in time and anywhere.
Right, okay. So we see a little bit of a pattern here, and use an awful analogy here with regards to product development. So Noel is like the baby bear, okay? So Noel works with the young companies and product startups, And then we need to, it's the mammy bear. So they're the companies that are being built now, they're just getting a little bit bigger. Then you have the daddy bear, and you know how many product development cycles you're in. So you're around, 16 years, I'd say, with that product.
Yeah, Phorest is around 16 years. It kind of started at the start as a messaging advertising kind of platform for SMS, then realised basically through going to work with customers that salons had a much bigger need, so that kind of expanded out, and then from around the last 6-7 years, it's the real kind of growth hit, and it was like, okay, marketing for salons in this niche, and it just kind of grew internationally from there. And so now it's like, it's big scaling problems as opposed to trying to find product market fit. It's like, how do we keep up with what's going on internationally and stuff like that.
One question on that then is there any reason why it just really kicked off 7 years ago? Was it because technology changed or did the company change?
Yeah, it's a cloud version. So basically moved from on-premise to cloud software, which allowed us to do things like online bookings, branded apps for salons. We now launch 200 to 250 branded apps every month into the App Store. So the kind of scale of what we're doing now is huge, but that all started in about 2012 when it became more than just an appointment book. It was like advertising, marketing, our SMS and email marketing stuff still exists, and we'll do about 10 million messages in a month just on that alone. So it grew a lot from 2012.
Well, that's good. I think so the next question I really want to look at is in the C-suite in your companies, quite large companies, is design baked into that point? Has it always been, or is it actually a new thing, or is it at all? Is there a place for design on the table?
Yeah, so Gary, the CEO and co-founder of Teckro, basically comes from a design background. So I suppose Gary's really supportive in putting the user first, especially in our product experience, which is really nice because a lot of times in my background, in my career, the C-suite would more so kind of throw a product idea over the fence, whereas Gary's all about let's invest in qualitative, quantitative research at the early stages before we advance the product or go forward with it. And then outside of that, we've just recently brought on a new Chief Marketing Officer, Kelly Brown. So Kelly's basically going to drive the Teckro brand now, and especially of course our acquisition channels. So it's quite exciting that the company itself is investing as a startup into design, because it's not normally, I suppose, the key focus in startups.
So we're quite similar in that. So Ronan, when he founded it, was really interested in design, and he did all of the design for the first number of years, and then I joined about 4.5 years ago, and quickly hired a first designer, and then in about the last 2 years or so, we've gone from one designer to about to be 5 and a UX researcher. So it was kind of like as soon as we understood, wow, this has big impacts, it just kind of grew from there. And so myself sitting over product and design sit at the C-suite as well. So it is quite important.
Yeah, I think it's massively important what we do. In fact, 3 of the guys that are part of the C-suite would say that our program are all ex-IDEO. So we've ex-IDEO, yeah, they come from IDEO, and there's a huge amount of design-driven thinking within our organisation, because with startups, a lot of the time they're very technically capable of what they're doing. But the big problem they have is they don't know how to fill the gap, with the sort of the imagination gap for the customers who might be interested in the product, or whoever it might be that's interested in what they're doing. Also on top of that, because they sort of because they're technical people, they assume everyone else is an idiot, rather than thinking that their product is not properly fleshed out or designed for the customer or whoever they're gearing it towards. So I would say that we're probably primarily design driven as far as the development of new product ideas and working with startups. And the other thing that's really important from that perspective for us is the idea that we work with a lot of new technologies that probably have never existed before in forms that they've never existed before. So we have to try and fill that gap between, like, what existed and how do people understand it, and making it something that people are interested in and wanting to use. And with new technologies, that can be very, very difficult to do. So we place a massively heavy emphasis on design from that perspective.
And so just keeping on design in that respect, is design then completely in-house, or is that something that you bring in as well? Externally?
Okay, well, I mean, we try to keep it as much in-house because we're investors as well as program provider.
Okay.
So we have skin in the game, right? So like we're very interested in our teams and startups. They don't get picked otherwise, right? And we have we're very interested in making sure that they realize their full potential. And sometimes we do encourage teams to work with other design companies, but it's only after that initial ideation phase, because for us we feel like that's the part that you're actually working out a lot of the very difficult problems. I'm not going to say like we let them out and they get polished off by other design companies, whatever it might be, but it's certainly the case that a lot of the heavy lifting happens in those early days, and you need to have a concentrated effort of design on that, and then we're more than happy to to go and talk to other people afterwards, because we've more of them to deal with anyways, right? So our cycle is a bit different.
And for us, it's all in-house, and it wouldn't work if it was outsourced in any way, because so for us from the start, it's a lot of prototyping, a lot of talking to customers, getting out of the office, that kind of stuff. But once we get into development on something, it's a dev tribe, as we would call it, which is about 5 developers, a QA, a product owner, and a designer, and they just work week in, week out, and it changes because whatever you thought it was at the start is probably different at the end. So we couldn't take a deliverable from a consultancy or a design agency and keep going, because it just changes, and design is too central to the ongoing development for it to be outsourced for us.
Is that kind of quite a common thing where you have 5 developers, 1 designer? Is that the ratio?
Yeah, we
heard that a lot. Like.
Yeah, we I think it was Spotify that we took that from. We did some kind of reading on ideal team sizes, and that was kind of what they called it in pods and stuff. sure there's variations that work as well. It just works for us, so it's good for us. It allows us to have concurrent teams as well. We've got development teams of about 30 people, so we don't want them all on one thing, or they'll be stepping on each other's toes. And so there's a bit of chopping and change, but that works for us size-wise.
Yeah, in Teckro it's similar. We have all design in-house, so that's like across product and marketing. So product, I suppose, falls within the product team. And we've kind of split that into, we invest like in research, so we've got UX researchers, which kind of deal more with the ideation phase. And then I suppose in our product to development scale, we go from ideation into discovery, then design, and then delivery. So designer have to be heavily involved between the kind of your discovery, design, and delivery stage, but they really need to know the impact that has come out of the ideation phase. So yeah, all of that's internally in-house because it wouldn't really work if we were to outsource it at all.
And so, I mean, from each of your stages that we were talking about and where your product is, etc. What I was going to ask was, in that product development, how do you use design to create and enhance your product? Is there any methodologies, or is there, like when we were talking earlier on about design sprints, or is there anything that you use yourself?
I mean, for us, we wouldn't necessarily do a specific design sprints, although we're really successful as an approach.
Yeah.
It's kind of ongoing, more discovery, as we said. So we kind of based it off. I don't know if you've ever heard of Martin Kagan, who's this book called Inspired. It's really good around how to develop products, and it basically includes somebody from product management, somebody from design, and somebody from engineering. And those three just kind of ongoing, constantly iterate on prototypes, go out and talk to customers. Like we would have, so our designers, for example, at least once every 6 weeks, would have to go and work in a salon for a day, because it's very different actually working behind a counter and reception and doing that. I do it myself as well. It's absolutely terrifying because they think I'm the expert and I'm like not the expert. So designers have to kind of get out there and do that. So as opposed to it being a one-off project, it's constant. They have to talk to at least 5 clients a week. We're quite lucky that in Dublin, at South William Street, for example, there's 15 Phorest clients within a kilometre radius, so we can just walk and do research. So it's so ongoing. One-off sprint kind of almost isn't enough for us, really.
You get to work, those salons get you for free, is it?
They don't actually. They love to tell other salons that they are like experts.
Right.
People helping Phorest. They'll say like, oh, you know, we're part of Phorest, like in our group, and we get to do this, and it's kind of like an ego thing, but it helps us massively. It's actually interesting. We used to pay vouchers for people answering surveys, and we just tried to not pay vouchers, and more people answered the surveys. We just stopped.
Very interesting.
We feel like experts. We call them our expert beta groups. And the word expert in, and
it's probably more honest than that as well.
They just love to be involved, and it's great. So they love this stuff. We get really excited when we get to show them new stuff, and they tell us all the ways it would work, and then they see it come live, and then they realise we listen to them, and we get great feedback from that.
So if you're looking for salon staff, Anita?
So I suppose what's really key in that discovery phase is just bringing in the right people at the right time as early as you can before you kind of go through the stages of solutioning into like a prototype as such. So like that, bringing in your developer, bringing in key business areas, having your product designers, product managers in the room, and just validating things before moving forward. And then kind of running into kind of loved out concepts and going out and user testing them. So you don't have to go out with your own product. Go out with grayscales, go out with wireframes, and actually just start understanding that UX flow, the behaviour, if it's kind of limiting in some regard, and then go back and reiterate. Because the most critical thing I suppose you can do is like ignore your user testing and go with development and just hope for the best, and assume that when you go into development it's going to be grand, because in 90% of the time it's going to get over, like it's going to come back, and it's you're going to see it far more as a critical bug as when you've gone live with the product. So it's just the continuous issue of testing and getting evaluated with users and making it work.
We had a similar thing which literally just happened last week, so it's kind of on top of my mind. So we went out and did all that, did user testing on a new email marketing suite, did a lot of stuff and launched it, and people who showed it to, they absolutely loved it. But once it went live, nobody was actually using it, or 60% of them weren't using it. And the problem was that they weren't actually getting into the point where they could use it, because our first step was to create a campaign name. So they didn't get to go in and explore the new thing, so they just went back to the old thing, because we put up like 2 or 3 blockers. So all of the user testing that we did was on the feature, but we didn't user test how they're going to get to the feature, and until we went live we realised that was completely wrong, and we just redesigned it. So it's never over, really.
And how long did that process take?
It probably from go live to understanding the problem was about 2 or 3 weeks. We put a tool called Pendo in place, which kind of gives us the user flows, shows us who dropped off. Our UX researchers then called clients who had got to that screen and dropped off, and our designers, who our UX and product designer called, gathered all the reasons, and then we shipped the fix this week on Tuesday. So it's probably a week from finding the problem to fixing it, and about 3 weeks to fully understand the problem, talking to clients.
When I think about startups and the work that we do, I could tell you some of the methodologies we go through, but then I'd have to kill you. It's top secret. But
You kill me.
I don't know if it's worth it. But when you're working with, say, startups, for example, I think you have to take things. It's a different sort of approach because they don't even really know what they're trying to do themselves, right? So you have to work through a lot of methodologies that sort of get them to tease out what their idea is and explain more about what they're trying to achieve from a product perspective. But we also have to think about the handoff between software and hardware and how does that work, and there's a whole bunch of different things that we need to go through. And we've developed and we do this in an accelerated methodology as well. So it's over maybe 3 to 6 months we're working with each startup. And the difficulty is that because you're moving at that speed with a piece of hardware, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And you don't want to be the guy who made a thing that blew up, right? So there's a huge amount more stuff from a technical perspective, from mechanical design, electronic engineering, etc., that we have to consider. And getting any of that wrong can cause big problems. So I think that what we've done is we've developed a set of methodologies around acceleration. Not just we're designing a product, but how do we do it quickly and how do we not kill people, that kind of thing. So and again, dealing with startups, because startups, a lot of people in love with the idea of being a startup or in love with the idea of being an entrepreneur. They can be a little bit difficult to deal with, or might have problems that with their product that they don't express to us at the beginning. Yeah. Those kinds of things are harder to tease out than, say, you're dealing with a client who's willing to pay you money, right? Like for us, startups, we give them money to come to our program, we invest in them. So that's a different dynamic than if a client is willing to pay you money to do the work for them. So it becomes, there's certain methodologies there. I won't go into any of the ones that are maybe a bit more dubious, but there is certainly a difference in how you might deal with startups and maybe established companies.
Okay, and just based on that, you're based a lot of the time in Shenzhen in China. So would a lot of the people who'd be on your on the accelerator as such be Chinese based?
Actually, we take teams from all over the world.
Yeah.
We work with teams from, we've seen a big increase from Europe at the moment, and we are dealing with a lot more Chinese startups as well. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of. There is a huge startup scene in China at the moment, and it's only getting bigger. Yeah. And we might be sitting here going, oh yeah, they can't compete with us, but I can tell you, it's some of the stuff they're doing is light years ahead of what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, I think that's true, because we always associated that side of the world maybe in manufacturing, but now a lot of the IP is beginning to be created there. And you design differently, for a Chinese market, obviously, than here. But what are those? Are there any kind of anecdotal stories?
So I think the way I look at it, because been dealing with a lot of startups over the last 7 years. And I think about international startups, the guys that we would have been dealing with for, say, the first 4 years, and we only started dealing more with Chinese startups recently, is that they're like a lion, right? We've figured out how to wrestle with the lion, and we figured out how to, tame the lion. Whereas the Chinese startups are like a bear. It's a different set of weapons it can kill you with, right? And you need to figure out how to deal with that, right? And it can often be around things like cultural differences as well, right? For us, we think it's weird or strange, but it's not. It's just the way things are done there, right? And you need to sort of assimilate yourself to that environment and understand how you deal with that, rather than get frustrated and try to project what you would normally do with international startups into the Chinese dynamic. It's a completely different thing. And if you don't understand that, then you are going to get frustrated, and you're the one that loses then.
And the idea, in terms of your product development, at whatever stage you're at, do you have to tweak it for different markets in terms of?
Yeah, so I would say that Australia is quite like Ireland and the UK. They're very similar markets. In the US, there's a lot more around kind of reputation and things like that. So like things like Yelp, online reviews, that kind of stuff is really important to them. And then one of the biggest learnings that we had is when we went into Germany and Austria, there's just a whole different world there. So in Ireland, there's a lot of cash appointments that get deleted, and they just disappear from the appointment book. But in Germany and Austria, every transaction has to be sent to a central authority and has to be passed back with a token that can be audited for tax purposes. So we didn't realise this, and we had to rebuild an entire strict POS system. And then even from the user experience, like our email and marketing suite would say, like, you know, hi Paddy, great to see you today. That's really rude in Germany. It has to say, hi, Mr. Monaghan. So you have to change it to a salutation and a second name, which we didn't realise, so we launched that. There's loads of little tweaks like that that you have to make.
I suppose in Teckro, that's kind of the really good thing about the product. It's kind of a one size fits all. So you know, while it's the content that people are viewing and retrieving is valuable to them and unique to the customer, but actually when we input that into our system, it's the experience of what they go through is sufficient across everyone's experience. So it's very easy, I suppose, in that regard. But obviously incredibly challenging to get the right information at the right time to the right people.
Just going back to you, Paddy, you said something earlier on to me about designing for a niche and designing specifically for a client and not a broad audience. Something you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, we have, so for us there's very different things in our industry. So we don't want to go into like gyms and things like this, and it's almost the first thing everybody says to us, like, well, you can go into gyms and events and everything. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's actually, there's so much specific stuff to our industry that's really challenging. So for example, every new entrant, there's loads of kind of cool Silicon Valley startups now trying to get into the space, and every one of them tries to create the Uber for hair because that's what they think is the next big thing. But generally speaking, Uber is like, give me the closest, cheapest available car, and they don't want the closest, cheapest available stylist, they just want their hairstylist. So actually 90% of the business is retention, and the marketplace doesn't do that at all. So all of our competitors are coming in doing that, and we're building retention marketing software. So if you actually apply that to other industries where they're trying to find new clients, it just actually wouldn't work. Whereas if we're really good at this, you know, we can really win in that space. And then another thing that comes in a lot is, in our industry, there was a study done that showed where people struggled in schools, basically because of dyslexia that was undiagnosed. A lot of the males went into construction and the females went into hair and beauty. So actually 60% of our industry is dyslexic. So it's like this huge big challenge that people wouldn't realise. So we have to take that into account when we design the product. There's kinesthetic design practices, which means you have to use a lot of colour and certain contrasts and stuff like that. But also, as we're a marketing suite, we had to invest in a partnership with a machine learning based writing aid, which basically can auto-correct dyslexic specific grammar checks, mistakes, readability enhancements, all this stuff as they type. So we did partnerships on that, and because we do these things, our clients see us do these things and they love it, they know it's built for them. But if we just threw that into a gym industry, it just doesn't really kind of fit. So the design of it is so specific to our industry, it's why we're winning. We're the fastest growing in our industry right now globally, so we think that's like the reason, or the main reason.
Yeah. I should totally be working in the salon, I think. It would be dyslexic. I use Grammarly, there's only use that, it's just great for
They wouldn't let us license Grammarly, so it's pro right now. We try to.
It's a good one. I suppose the next question is then, is there any design methodologies that like people in the audience could use? Trying to give away without killing them.
I suppose if anyone's doing hardware,
Yeah.
for example, you look at hardware specific, one of the first things I always ask startups to do is just write the instruction manual. So what that forces you to do is look at every step of how your product's going to be used. This physical manifestation, how is it going to be used? And when you do that, you sort of go, oh shit, right, this is so complex or so difficult to use that I need to figure out how to get rid of some of these steps, or can I omit a feature that doesn't make sense, or whatever it might be. And it also, like, from the point where you press a button on a product, is like it sets off a chain reaction of what's happening with the electronics and how that interfaces with a piece of software, etc., etc. And then you start to realize and understand just how difficult it is for you to execute on all of those things. So it sort of helps you to understand all your features, how difficult it is for you to execute on those features, and then be able to match up what your current set of skills are in order to be able to execute on those features. So you could end up omitting a bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense because it's going to be too difficult for you to do, and isn't really adding enough value to the product. So it's a very simple thing, but it forces you to deliver a lot of answers to yourself. Just write an instruction manual. It's very simple.
That's great.
So for us, I would say it's to try something like dual track agile. I don't know if you've seen of that. So like agile, so agile software development again, and that book that I mentioned, inspired by Martin Kagan, has a lot on this as well. But it's a common approach. So agile, obviously, in terms of how we work in Scrum, it's 2-week software development cycles, but that's all on execution. So you tend to put all of your focus on that. So what you do is take that same 2 weeks and take one engineer from the team and yourself and a designer, so product and design or whoever's leading the team, have experiments or things that they need to do in that 2 weeks as well. So you give yourself a goal of the next thing you're going to build. So for example, for us, something we're seeing a lot in beauty salons is aesthetic treatments are coming in now, which are kind of more medical, right? So they're a bit more like Botox and things like that, or variations of it. So we don't really support that fully. So what we're doing right now is while we're building one feature, 3 people are experimenting with what would work for those clients, and that means quickly prototyping, user testing, surveys, phone calls, intercom-based conversations, and setting a goal of the things you want to learn in that 2 weeks. And then when people demo at the end of the week, you kind of demo what you learned about the next thing, and you repeat, and when it's ready, then it moves into execution and demo. And that kind of approach works really, really well.
Yeah, so you basically, you haven't lost a huge amount of time. You don't feel bad if it didn't work out, and you haven't used a load of resources, and you get on with it.
The 3 areas of expertise in product management, design, and engineering, and their peers in that group. It's just the 3 experts together.
So I suppose I kind of touched on it before, and I know Patrick's touched on it as well. It's like the power of user testing and kind of early on, making sure that you're validating what you're testing. And to me, like, it's a very basic skill set. It's just like getting everyone in the room, getting whiteboard present, and everyone being involved in sketching. So, having your business area there, having your product or manager, product designer, and also having a developer there to validate the ideas, and not being afraid to throw it away. So many organisations that I've worked in start with a project and they're mid-cycle and it's just not working. They're hitting kind of different kind of blockers in the project pipeline that they weren't expecting. So, it is time. There's nothing wrong with throwing something away. Everyone always has a learning in everything that they do, and just reiterate, take those learnings and start again. And I know designers do it a lot in their career. They spend a lot of time throwing things away. So it's just to take that and put that into a different industry.
And you just explain a little bit about, you were saying when you do testing, that's qualitative testing, is it? So it's a smaller group that you're working with?
At the moment, we're just trying to set it up because we're in startup and trying to really focus on getting in contact with our end users. Yes, so there is quantitative, obviously from a data that we assess and we go through to make those decisions with products going forward. But yeah, qualitative is really important, and 2 UX researchers have recently come on board, and we're putting a key focus on our end users, reaching out to them, being through surveys, and just looking at behaviours and interactions, and just understanding where we're having success with our product and where we're not having success, and there are key areas that we may need to address.
Okay. Well, the next question really is, what are the biggest challenges, the biggest learnings going forward?
So for us, the next biggest challenge is we're in the middle of a project to essentially just revamp the whole UI, the whole product. And we've been doing it area by area rather than kind of doing it all stop in a big project. And our challenge now is, as we move to new kind of more modern design approaches and new look and feel, we've actually noticed that a lot of our competitors are all going towards that kind of same look and feel. So we're trying to create a personality within that, and that's a big challenge that we're finding. It's a lot of kind of visual approaches to the icons we use. We're trying to actually create some ourselves, draw them up ourselves, that kind of just to create a look that feels like it's Phorest when you look at it at the start, and that's a big challenge.
It is. There's so many that look the same right now in terms of that. Like, Intercom have that kind of style, but you can see so many people are very like that now, or copying it, I should say,
As soon as a style is successful, somebody creates a library somewhere and all you do is plug it in, and then every startup has that same library, and then you're trying to create something unique. It's very, very difficult.
I'll probably speak about something completely different because for us it's, I suppose, because we deal with startups and we're an investment company, where our challenges probably lie more and more is trying to avoid Tyrannus and Juicero type situations where you're building a piece of physical hardware that may never work, or else it's just a complete waste of time, right? So one of our biggest challenges is how do we keep de-risking startups? How do we build ways to make sure that we're not getting caught with those kinds of things, because that happens to everyone, right? That's the first thing, and then the second thing is how do you that's why we spend so much time on our startups and work closely with them on programs, is because we want their investors that might invest in them later to understand that we have skin in the game. That it's not just some guy coming in with a harebrained scheme or whatever it might be. And I think that there are some of the bigger challenges today for anyone trying to do some startup stuff. Is like, I feel like the industry's getting a little bit damaged by those kinds of stories, and I think it's a challenge for everyone, but specifically for us from a hardware specific perspective, we see a lot of that sort of thing happening.
Most people you work with their hardware products.
All hardware. That said, now Hacks is part of a group of accelerators under the SOSV company. So we do work in synthetic biology. We do work in software. We work in food as well. So we have a number of different types of accelerators, but same rule almost applies everywhere. You can get caught by people not really being entirely transparent about what they're doing, or how well or how far along their tech actually is.
Hello? Is Anita's mic on there? Sure. Try again. Let's give it 1 second. Do you?
So basically, because the stage, I suppose, in the life cycle where Teckro is right now, kind of moving from we've got products really well defined in the past. I suppose in the last 10 months since I've been on board, we've launched another 2 products, and I've worked with the teams to get them to market. So before we go into this kind of rapid growth phase, so recently in January we received funding for round C funding. So basically Teckro wants to now move to the next level. But before we go there, I don't know if anyone's experienced it previously, but when you're working in product and design, you try to design the most optimal experience for the end user to solve that problem, but you're always faced with limitations, be it through the technology, kind of legacy systems, and it's kind of a blocker on what you really want to achieve. So the really exciting part about Teckro right now is that we're taking time to make that investment into the agility basically of our software, the performance, and just future-proofing it for how we're going to move forward. So it is a challenge right now, but it's I can only see a positive outcome out of it moving forward.
Cool. I suppose one last question I have here would be, can you give the audience some examples, or an example of what I consider to be a high-impact, low-effort takeaway that can help them with their product strategy? So I always start with those things in my own company. Low effort, right?
I think of all the research that when you're talking to customers is the best thing that you can possibly do. It just absolutely is the best thing that you can do. And I would say that actually go and work, use your product in whatever it's supposed to be used. So for us, it's going to work in a salon. We learn things we never thought were possible. We've now created empathy sessions. So we literally have our UX researcher, had our executive team, different people from the company, sitting in a room with the noise of a salon, giving you job. Okay, there's a 6-person bridal party just turned up. They need this, and they're ringing the phone and trying to create that environment, because it's just completely different when you do that. So, whatever you're in, go and use your products and do that, because you'll just learn way more, and it's really low impact. Call a client, they love it. Go out, work with them for a day. You'll learn stuff you didn't think you knew before.
Yes, I think it's quite similar. It's basically, it doesn't cost anything. It's so little to put an investment in user testing and to get that feedback back. Once you focus on the problem, once you focus on the user, you're going to come out with the best product. So I suppose, it's very similar to what Patrick said.
Yeah.
I suppose, again, I'm going to be looking at it from a startup perspective. What is the one question I would ask someone to do if they were thinking about doing a startup, especially in hardware, because hardware is hard, right? And it would be, will you give up what you're doing right now in your job to do it, right? Because that's what I see a lot of the time, is people are like, they start off with a side hustle, and it's something that they think they want to do, but they're not really sure, and then they're out there trying to gather all this information from different people and extrapolate from that is this idea of there's going to be a success. And I can't count the amount of times, I'm sure you guys early in your career probably heard it, if you help me out with this, I give you half of everything, right? And it's sort of a situation where my first answer to that is, will you give up your job? Because you're asking me to give up my job to help you to do this, right? And that kind of a serious question will put it on the level. It's the fastest way for you to be able to understand whether you are willing to do this or not.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. So we'll kind of wrap it up in here just around now, but I think skin in the game has come out quite a lot. Whether it's going to cost you a lot or it's not going to cost you a lot. So Nicholas Nassim Taleb, if that's where you kind of use that term a lot, skin in the game, is definitely a book to check out. But what I'll do is I'll open it up to the audience if you have any questions for the panel.
Yeah, one open question and then one that's probably more specific. Just wondering how the frequency level of your user testing.
So for us, it's every week there's user testing going on. It's constant. So a lot of the time that's quite simple. It could literally be because we're on Capel Street, and we're rebuilding our branded apps right now. So we'll walk down to the boardwalk and test it there. So it's not big studio stuff. It's very simple, but that would be every week definitely for us.
And just not getting too into the specifics, but are these various prototype forms, or is it just depends on the particular need? Or
It depends. A lot of the time when we go out to do that stuff, it's kind of envision high fidelity enough type stuff. You can go out with a lot more lower fidelity, as was mentioned earlier on. That works too, but when we go out on the street, stuff like that, it's hard for them to picture stuff with wires. Depends on the person you're testing with, I think.
yeah, same.
I suppose just to further to that, you can go out with low fidelity if you want to more so understand the UX flow. You know, if you don't want them to get too bogged down on the visual of it, because sometimes that can skew the actual interaction that you're trying to test. So that's why you kind of make that decision when you're going out level and when you go and what you're going to get for the testing. But there's no harm in just literally grabbing anyone, be it family, be it strangers, and just testing on anyone. It doesn't have to be the formal process of testing as such.
That's kind of leading on to my next question. So, it's Teckro's a healthcare practitioners.
It's within the clinical research. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have challenges with actual users getting them in front of your prototypes?
Well, I suppose
Frequent level?
we have kind of, I suppose, 6 groups of core end users, which are very different. We have a B2B side and then we have more a B2C side. And B2C, I suppose, would be site staff or clinicians in hospitals. So it is challenging to get people who are using Teckro because we're based in America from a user kind of testing perspective.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't test in local hospitals and being a little bit innovative in how we want to test the product. So.
And in terms of frequency, would that happen on a regular enough basis?
The products that we're offering are quite, I suppose, they're not very, it's more the behavioural interaction of the product. So, for example, a communication product, so while we do need it in a hospital environment, but it's actually to get your understanding of how do you use WhatsApp, for example. So it's not necessarily so targeted at the area that you're working in.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I don't know if I can offer any help from a software perspective. No, it's fine. I suppose our user testing, the way we do user testing is we actually spend a lot of time developing concept design artwork that we can get out to do A/B testing on likes of Facebook and whatnot to get people to understand, can they understand how this product works, things like that when it comes to consumer type product. And we do a lot of work with corporates when we want to find out more about a B2B kind of product, so and that's across all fields. Again, I think about the hardware UX of a product is a hard thing to deploy very quickly. We've got to do a lot of this very quickly, and I find that sometimes we do what's called low fidelity sketch modeling and things like that. I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone here, but that kind of stuff really helps us to understand ergonomics and form factor and how people will use the product and that kind of stuff. So we try to do that concurrently with the technical development of a physical product, and you know, because you can't really give someone something that might blow up, right? So you have to sort of go, okay, here's the thing and how it will look and how it will function, and we're working on this stuff as well, but you're not really going to see that until we're finished the entire product.
Yeah, hi. So I just had a question about kind of convincing leadership in organisations about the value of design, and you all seem to be in very fortunate situations where either that was set before you got there, or maybe you've had to fight for that. I'm just wondering, could you talk about some of your experiences fighting with, you know, upper management to prioritise design and how you've gone about that? Sorry, fighting might be a very strong word.
Just to talk about it from my own career perspective, when I started doing design, I had a very difficult time trying to convince people of the value of it, right? That's why I ended up doing startups myself and developed some products that we end up selling, because you're able to put a number to that then, right? And that makes a big difference. People will listen when they see a number. And then that led to the opportunity to work on other startups' products as part of the accelerator program that I currently work for now. But they didn't even have that at the beginning. It wasn't something they placed any value on until we were able to see a result from it, right? And I'm not saying you go out and do a bunch of pro bono work or whatever to convince people of it, but it's about sort of attaching some numbers to it to be able to go, okay, that's why this is valuable. It's not just about, you know, that it's going to be nice to look at, it's going to be a better experience. It's going to give you more margin. That's why you need to do this, you know? So.
I would say we have similar problems. At the start, it took a lot, because when I joined, the CEO was the product design, everything, and to get him to understand that we needed to hire a designer was quite difficult to do. And we still have these same problems when you're trying to introduce new initiatives. It might not be design, it might be around data, or we wanted to buy this tool called Pendo to get better analytics through the product. So what we did is we just got trials and things and then showed it. So instead of trying to argue ahead of time, try and do a show don't tell type of approach. Like, is there things that you can do that can, without getting everybody on board, that can be a small kind of project that you can then show the results of and say, look, this is what we did with no resources. Imagine what we could do if we had more resources. It might not be easy in your industry, but if you think along those lines, it's quite the same. You need to show results. No one's going to believe just, this is great, I promise, trust me, you know, it's very hard to do.
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate, I suppose, in Teckro, but I have been in companies where I haven't been so fortunate. And the two key areas that I always think are the most valuable when you're going to present to the C-suite of why an idea should possibly not go forward and why it's not valuable is they can't lie against research and metrics. Once you stand up there and put the power of a metric in front of them, no one can argue it. And then I suppose the second is really clear visualization when you're trying to communicate something. So it's so important that you stand up with a slide and you know the purpose, you know the person you're speaking to, and that they're going to get that same understanding that you're trying to get across.
Yeah. I just have one that kind of very similar thing that we just did recently. So we were trying to get people on board with redesigning the appointment screen, which is like the holy grail in our product, and a lot of people put in a lot of work to design that. So we set up one of our empathy sessions so that the people who built it, the CEO and stuff like that, would have to do that empathy session, and we gave them steps to perform on that screen that we knew were so difficult they wouldn't be able to do themselves. So they understood straight away, I designed this and I can't even use it, and then they can't really argue against that. You know what I mean? That was kind of what we did.
Yeah, I think we'll end it at that. I'd just like if you could put your hands together for Noel, for Anita, and for Callan. And